Hey, so this is the best disco shirt I could come up with. What do you think? My wife's been looking at this pink shirt sitting in my closet going, why do you need a pink shirt? Well, apparently this is why I need a pink shirt. Because I remixed Scatman Crothers, a originally unreleased recording in 1979 produced by Andrew Melzer. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Andrew. So this was a particularly challenging remix because, well, all the multi-track tapes had been lost long ago. Apparently, Scatman took off with them, and that was the last we saw of the multi-track tapes. So Andrew had just simply some stereo mixdowns. They weren't mastered, but they were finalized. They were good mixes. And that's all I had to work with was these mixdowns. I had the stereo master mixdown, and then I had the band tracks, and I was hoping I could phase cancel the band tracks with a stereo master and try and pull some things out, but that didn't work so good, so I ended up just working basically with a stereo master. And because it was a live recording back in 1979, there wasn't a click track or anything like that. It was a great jam session. Some good disco. But the tempo fluctuated a bit, so I had to do some things to try and get that stereo master into time on a grid so that I could work with it in a Pro Tools session. And I'll start by talking about that, which was a headache in and of itself. So let's take a look at the session here. And I ended up because I was doing so much work in the same session, ended up producing all of my versions within this same Pro Tools session. So I started here with the tempo corrections up here at the beginning. There's my tempo corrections. And you see all my tempo markers up here. Let's switch this view, warp view, and zoom in here. And you can see that what I did was I used Beat Detective to help me lay down markers, tempo map up here, all the way across here for this first original recording. And you can see that the tempo fluctuates throughout. I didn't want to tempo map every single quarter note and subbeat. I just wanted to tempo map the bars so that I could keep that funky disco feel in between and sort of let that play around with and in between and back and forth with the beats that I was putting on. So there's my 1-bar tempo markers in my tempo map. And then I locked everything down to a ticks time base over here, right there, ticks time base. And this way I could, literally after I locked that down, I could drag this entire thing to my new tempo. Obviously up here, a tempo. So we had tempo fluctuations in here ranging from 120, in the original 120, way down to 124 all the way up to 132 at the end where they were really jamming. And I decided to go for a pretty typical house tempo, 128 beats per minute. So then after I got everything locked down and all that stuff tempo mapped, then I was just able to simply drag this entire region up to my next tempo here, and it conformed. Because I had all the warp markers laid out, and I had everything, all these warp markers and the track set to a ticks time base so that everything would conform. And then I just simply took the whole stereo waveform and dragged it up here. And then as you can see my production work here, what I did was I started off with the radio remix, which is about 3.5 minutes. And then after I was done with the radio remix, I grabbed the entire thing and just scooted the entire production up the timeline so that I could produce the DJ remix with a nice little mix in, mix out, and a little break in the middle. Just a little bit extra flavor for spinning in the clubs. I did a lot of tempo work with the markers. Once I actually dragged it over, I had those basic things, but there were still, even because there were such fluctuations in between with the human feel, there were some spots in here, let's see if I can find one here, where I actually had to go in and seriously readjust some of the tempo markers or some of the warp markers, leaving those tempos on the downbeat, but then adding some additional warp markers so I could stretch and conform some of those beats. Let's look at the warp again. So right here, here's a spot. Well, you can see up here, the timing was pretty good, and it was locking in on the downbeats. And then all of a sudden, I got in this area here where things were just starting to wobble all over the place, and it wasn't working with the groove I was putting down. So I literally had to go in here, start adjusting and moving around some of these warp markers so I could get them snapped to the grid the way I wanted to. So that was a lot of work. But once I got it set down, once I got everything locked in, it was really easy to scoot things around and make edits on the grid. It was just that preliminary work of getting everything set up. And then the next trick after getting all that set up was to, because all the music was in there, is to do a little bit of EQ on here. That is really bad timing on my cell phone. And I can't even grab it because I'm wired in here. Stop. Remind me to put it on vibrate. Okay. Please stop. All right, there we go. I'm magic. I made it stop. All right. Where was I? Oh, yes. The next thing I had to do was I was working with the stereo mix, so I needed to carve out some space in the bottom end so I could add a kick drum, a new kick drum, and a bass line. I had a lot of fun with this bass line. Let's take a listen to the bass line, run the radio remix, jumping right in. The telephone. That's too funny.
Hey, baby, we're having a party. Come on over. Your body feels the heat, and you're grooving with the beat. Get down. It's party time.
Party time. And so I had to do some carving in here. So I really went after this with some EQ here. You can see I scooped out the bottom end. Added some compression. Look, I was hitting the compression pretty hard. So what did that look like? Trying to limit it out there. And then I was coming in and out with a little air vintage filter. I had automated that. And then one interesting story about this whole thing is I remixed the entire thing using the original stereo master, but the original stereo master hadn't been mastered. I should say the original stereo mix. So I did this whole thing, and then I had Michael Denton master it, and he mastered the original stereo mix and did some really cool things to it, including adding a little bit of room reverb to the vocals. Well, actually the whole mix, but it sounded like just the vocals, and really brought out the lead vocals and just a little bit of mastering magic on it. And so that sounded way better than the one I used. So I ended up flying that back in and readjusting the markers and everything else. So even though I started with the mix of the original stereo mix, I ended up flying the master back in that Michael Denton mastered to get it to sound better in my remix. It's a really weird combination, but it worked. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it, but like I said, it worked. I then was able to go a little bit easier on some of my EQ and things with carving things out, and the vocals were where they needed to be, and they weren't sounding too spitty. It sounded nice. And then I had to go in here and literally start writing my own beat and making it sync up. See my kick drum tracks, bass line. Here's my bass line. And of course, writing a bass line that was going to sort of cover up the original funk bass line and give it a bit more up-to-date flavor. Little sort of housey, electronic, dubstep kind of flavor on the bass line. And that's really the primary focus after the beat, was putting this bass line on. Let's see if I can solo that. And this is a Reason sound. As anybody watches my production work knows that I love Reason. I'm always using it, rewired into Pro Tools. And I doubled it with another sub bass. Sorry to hear that one right now. Put some lead synths on. Let's check out the Reason rack over here. Got combinators set up, individual outputs, everything going up here to my Reason hardware interface. Got Kong. I used Kong for the drums. Just a ton of fun sounds. And of course, as I've mentioned before, I like to build my own sounds in here. So like here's an init patch here, something that I made where I just, that one doesn't have very much in it. Let's try something else here. Oh, my noise risers. It's got some downward compression, kick drum triggering it, Thor synth, scream distortion. That's a fun one. And yeah, a lot of ear candy in here. And you can see all the ear candy tracks down here. So up here you've got all the percussion tracks up here, and then the bass line, and then below that some synth lead lines, chords, and ear candy tracks down there. And then once I got done with the whole radio remix, I just copied it all over, did some edits over here, came up with a little mix in for the DJ remix. Having some fun. This is a great track to remix, especially, well, once I got through all the technical stuff of setting things up and getting everything on the grid, then it was just a blast to remix. So,
Hello. Hi, baby. We're having a party. Come on over.
I love that line. Okay. In conclusion, this is available all over the place, the original and the remixes. Check out like Apple, iTunes, Amazon, wherever. And it will be on if you happen to be a voting member of the Grammys of National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. Please consider this for Best Remixed Recording. Scatman Crothers, Scoot On Over To Scat's, the Erik Hawk remix. And also the original is in the Best Dance Recording as well. But, you know, I know there's a lot of stuff out in the Best Dance Recording, but hopefully you'll consider this for Best Remixed Recording with a Grammy. Okay, thank you very much, and see you soon. Ciao.